Update on Reddit stock. It has not been getting much relief at all. We're now down a total of 50% in just a couple of weeks. Now, if you did catch my last macro update video, then I did mention that I sold my positions on this bounce here that we got after earnings because the price action was looking pretty scary. I just didn't want to get caught stuck in a position while price is continuing to head lower and lower. That being said, I do think the stock is due for a bit of a bounce at some point. Now, the question is, will that bounce be coming now that we've hit this level here around 126 that we drew on previously? Of course, there is a gap fill around here, seemingly we have come to. I don't think this is the bottom at all by any means, but it could be good for a recovery bounce. Alternatively, before you get that bounce, we may even head to this trend line here, which is currently sitting around $120, $119. I would expect price to attempt to retest the bottom of the parallel channel at some point. That is quite often a thing that you do. Now, we didn't quite get there on the earnings push, but if you did see the market rally in general, then it's possible we could either bounce, from here, or potentially we may head a little bit lower before trying that recovery bounce. Now, I would caution against trying to time these bounces. Obviously, it can be good for quite a decent gain if you're able to get in and get out. This would be a 30% move, which is quite massive, isn't it? But there are very much warning signs that are showing that the stock may be entering a bearish regime. And for its entire period here, we've been in a bullish regime. So if we do flip bearish, then it's not going to be looking good for the stock. Let me clean up the chart a little bit just so I can show you what's going on in terms of whether we are bullish or bearish. So this is my indicator that helps follow trend, which may shed some light on the situation. Here we have the probability of a cross occurring into a bearish regime, and that's sitting right now at 82%. So you have to imagine price would really have to reverse heavily for us to not flip into a bearish regime right now. Similarly, only 5 days essentially until that is likely to happen. So from this perspective, the stock is not looking very good at the moment. Now, that doesn't mean you won't get bounces at some point. In fact, we may be getting a bounce right now if we're a little bit too oversold and we've hit sort of a key level potentially around this 126. But I just would caution against buying dips right now. And I would imagine that any pumps are going to be quite aggressively sold off, particularly once we do flip into the bearish regime. Now, when these two lines do cross, perhaps in a couple of days or so, perhaps next week at some point, it is entirely possible that you actually get a pump. It is quite common that when the regime flips to bearish, you actually do get a pump into that, because there's a lot of traders and algorithms that are going to want to go bearish when the regime flips bearish, and so price often reverses and goes up for a little bit just to put pressure on those particular traders and algorithms and whatnot. So that's something to keep in mind. I could imagine we very much may get a bit of a bounce back up to this point where price did break down from, before potentially heading lower if we do confirm we're in a bearish regime. So that's entirely possible. Up to you whether you try to take the risk of, aiming for the entire 30% move back up there, or if you just try to get out of a long position a bit earlier, around the $150 mark, a potential support previously, and could in fact become resistance on the next attempt. So that's maybe a first take profit, and then a second one around $185 if we're able to get back up there before the trend resumes its bearish look. I'm not entirely convinced that even this particular long-term trend line is going to hold. If we do, perhaps eventually head back up here, retest, it might just crash straight through at that point. So that's something to keep in mind and be very wary of. Now, if we do break this line, I can look to issue further price targets. But as I've talked about previously, you imagine you'd have support around here at these levels where price initially used this line as resistance before heading higher in the past. So I would imagine this would act as a pretty good support, maybe even around the previous low here at $80 or so. That would probably be my next level. But if we're entering a proper bearish regime and the markets may even correct as well at a similar sort of time, that could be very bad for the stock and you may head a lot lower. Of course, I'd like to be optimistic on it, but until you at least head back up here and break back up into this parallel channel, I would be much more favoring a bearish view on Reddit at the moment. With that being said, thanks for watching. Do subscribe as always for more daily videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.